We didn't really have a big idea or really any business plan. We'd scraped together all the money we'd ever made and we went to China. We started and we lived off nothing for 7 years. We just worked 24/7, 7 days a week. Every day we basically just scrapped and fought and kept getting knocked down and kept getting up because we were so competitive that we really wanted to work out how to win.
He's one of the co-founders behind ZURU, a backyard idea turned global toy empire. Through bold innovation, industry disruption, and relentless global expansion, the company was set to achieve over $3 billion in annual revenue in 2024.
You've built a multi-billion-dollar a year annual revenue company. Can you talk us through how that is possible?
Part of our DNA is we have this mentality of around 2% improvement a week, and improvement compounds and quickly you become really good at something. It's the reason, I guess, in a short time we can grow to the size we had.
Were there times where it was so tough, Nick, where you thought this is too hard?
One of the things that you have to accept about being an entrepreneur is you're always going to have problems. You're always going to have fires. We just had like problem after problem after problem. You know, on those first 2 products, we got sued and we had no money. Literally, we had no money to defend ourselves in a lawsuit. And so you work out how to scrap and hustle and find a right way around it. That was the mindset always. When you don't have a choice, you've got to find a way.
Hear the stories, learn the proven methods, and accelerate your growth and future through entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Foundr Podcast with Nathan Chan.
I want to go back to the very beginning. Like you started ZURU with $20,000, which you borrowed from your parents, right? 18 years ago, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so take us back.
Yeah, I mean, we were sort of doing this on and off through, school holidays when we were kids. And then Matt went to my brother's Matt. He went to university to study engineering. He dropped out, I think, after 6 months. Didn't tell my parents, but kept kind of working, coming back to making this hot air balloon. And so he sort of started to make it a little bit more professionally. He set up a little production sort of facility on my parents' farm, dairy farm, in a place called Tokoroa. And I was a little bit younger, and then Matt sort of moved from there up to a place in Hamilton at a slightly better factory. And then I went to university for a year, studied law and commerce. Didn't actually make it into second year. And Matt was sort of struggling to make this hot air balloon in New Zealand. And he said to me, why don't you come to China? We'll go to China and we'll see if we can manufacture the hot air balloons. And sort of through my school holidays, I was always working on it as well to keep selling these balloons. And in my summer holidays in that first year of university. And because I hadn't made second year, I was like, didn't really have too many options. And I was like, sure, let's do it. So yeah, off we went to China. We'd sort of scraped together all the money we'd ever made. Matt had, a little bit of money from, selling some hot air balloons already. And we kind of asked mum and dad for a little bit of money, the bank and mum, dad, and they were always pretty supportive of us. So a small loan, I guess. And we went to China, and I remember the first night we landed actually in Hong Kong, and we were going to get a hotel, but we realized how expensive it was in Hong Kong. And so we went back into the airport and thought we'd just sleep in the airport the night, but the fluoro lights were so bright that we can't sleep in here, we don't need any sleep. So we went into the bushes outside Hong Kong airport, and then we got attacked by mosquitoes all night, but we slept in the bushes. And then we went up into a little place called Shantou, middle of nowhere in China, probably about 3 hours from Shenzhen, which most people will be familiar with. And that's where we first set up. And we got this little tiny apartment. It was on the 8th floor, no lift. It was probably $30 a month to rent. I remember every time we needed to get water, it was like this 8-floor journey to go and get some water and come back up. And that's kind of where we got our start. And from there, we realized that Shantou wasn't the right place. We moved to Shenzhen. Then we moved to a place called Huadu, a little town outside of Huadu called Fengshan. So imagine Northwest, just us. And we set up this little tiny factory. It was basically like a tin shed beside a river in Fengshan. And my cousin Simon had come over as well. He'd sort of been working with us a lot early on. And Simon welded our first production line. Literally, we couldn't even really afford much. We were really making every dollar stretch far. And from there, we started sort of making our hot air balloons. We had a couple of Chinese staff on board at that stage. We had you have to sort of cook for your Chinese staff as well. So we had this little old Chinese lady who would cook in a big sort of pan, sitting right beside the toilet on the ground on the concrete floor next door to the factory. And she'd cook like rice and a vegetable every day. And we'd sort of eat the same food as everyone else. It was, I think we were budgeting like 1 RMB or 2 RMB per meal. So, 30, 40, 50 cents per meal. And that's kind of what we lived on. Yeah. And I think the way to maybe the best way was, those first 2 or 3 years, we were so frugal that we wouldn't even go to, say, McDonald's. And the equivalent of the Big Mac combo in China was probably $3 Australian, or, $2.50 US. Even that was a treat. So I remember the first 2 years celebrating Christmas at McDonald's with my brother. And we always had this little trick because we were so frugal. We'd like eat half our fries and then go back to the counter and complain that they'd only give us half fries, so they'd reserve us more. So we really were like to the extreme in terms of like not spending any money.
What was the big idea? Like, what space did you think you guys could fill in the market when you moved there?
We were super naive, I think is the only way to explain it. We didn't really have a big idea or really any business plan, or we hadn't really thought through the space we could fill in the market. We were just going over there to try and make our hot air balloon. And we didn't even know there was such a thing as outsourcing or contract manufacturing. That's how naive we were. So we literally physically like set up our own little factory over in China, and just scrapped away. And then I guess we got better and better and better at what we did, and we started to learn more and more. And we sort of started to shape what we wanted to do, but it took us, a fair few years. And now I would say it's very much like a hockey stick. Those first few years were very slow going, and now it's very, very fast, sort of fast going. But we really, scrapped it out from very, very, very small beginnings.
So the hot air balloon, whatever happened there and what happened next?
Yeah, so the hot air balloon, well, we didn't know. I mean, this is lesson up to lesson. We didn't know that the hot air balloon couldn't meet any of the toy safety standards globally. So we couldn't really sell it to any mass retailers. We can only sell it to sort of specialists. And so we were sort of selling this hot air balloon. We had a few customers, and we were so naive, again, just to illustrate it. We didn't really know what IP was or patents were. And we'd seen sort of this night frisbee, and it was this frisbee with fiber optic and LEDs in it, and you can play this frisbee at night. And then I saw this sort of money bank. It was called a money gobbler, and it was in the shape of an animal, and you could put the coins in the mouth and they'd wind their way down to the stomach of this money bank. And so we made these two products that we'd kind of seen, and we just started making them in our factory. And I went to New York Toy Fair. It was a big expense at the time. You didn't get the tickets. I stayed in a hostel called Big Apple Hostel in New York. And I'd sold them to a distributor called Schilling. And we had him on Schilling's booth. And I was on the booth sort of on the first morning starting to sell our money gobbler and our night frisbee. But within about the first hour, this guy comes screaming onto the booth. Of course, we've breached all his patents. He has a whole company called Night Eyes that specialized in making these for, a decade. And we had no idea. So Dave says to me, you got to take the frisbee off the stand. So I take it off the stand. I'm like, oh, it's money I can sell. Well, I thought the first guy was crazy. Then this lady comes screaming onto a booth, and she'd been making these money banks, the same as what we basically copied for years and years and years and years. And she went even more crazy. So I had to take that off the booth. So within the first day of our first toy show, I had no products to sell. And I went back to China, sort of tail between my legs, and I said to my brother, "Man, you heard of this whole IP patent thing? I think we have to really start innovating our own products." And we had all of these lessons. So to explain just how naive we were extremely, extremely naive.
When did things really start to feel like you're working, and how long did that take?
It was slow. And then what we started to do is we're still sort of learning how to make our own products, and what would work and what wouldn't. And that was taking us a while. So I was learning how to hustle and get big retailers on board. I would effectively ring all the big retailers on email and hassle them every single day. And I was sort of starting to get some, bigger distribution channels. We had a couple of products, but what I was sort of doing was I was going to the US, and there were a lot of companies, toy companies there, that were making products just for the US market, but weren't taking them internationally. So I was negotiating multiple deals for much better toys than we were making at the time, and then taking them internationally. So we had a product called ZBs, which went really well. And we had a product called Schnooks, which was an idea out of Australia. And that started to go really well. And it was really allowing us to sort of develop all these distribution channels more internationally. And at the same time, we were starting to develop more of our own products. We developed, a brand called Night Sports, and we started to get distribution into the US. It wasn't a great product line, but we were sort of paralleling it and opening up distribution that way. And then I guess Schnooks became a relatively big hit with girls. And then after that, we had our first sort of major hit. We did a deal with David Beckham to make a Tamagotchi product, which went into Walmart, which is when we made sort of our first maybe big money. it was a disaster at retail, but we still made quite a bit of money. And then I guess our first major hit was Robo, and that took us to like $100 million in revenue. And that was probably 5 or 6 years in. And from there, we just got better and better and better, and have just the momentum keeps growing. I think as of June NPD data out of the US, we're sitting now just below Hasbro Mattel, Lego, Pokemon, then ZURU. So, it's been a pretty quick sort of hockey stick growth, and that growth has really compounded quickly. What's
your background around entrepreneurship, and how confident were you that when you moved to China, this was the right move for both you and your brother?
There was no confidence. There was maybe more a competitive nature and a drive within us to build something worthwhile, mainly because we didn't want to fail. And so I always say the hungry lion runs faster, and we were really, really, really hungry. We had really no choice to succeed. So every day we basically just scrapped and fought and kept getting knocked down and kept getting up and scrapped and fought because we were so, competitive that we really wanted to work out how to win. And I always say, one of my favorite sayings is you either win or you learn. And I would say that we did an awful lot of learning in those first 4, 5, 6, 7 years. But we always took those insights, and we always consistently worked out how we could be better every day, how we could improve.
It took you about 5 years to hit the big product, $100 million. Like what were other challenges leading up to that you could share with our listeners and viewers?
I think you've got to have the right mentality. So the hardest part is just starting, but the next most important part is making sure you don't flatline. And so part of our DNA is we have this mentality around 2% improvement a week, and improvement compounds, and quickly you become really good at something. So if you know when you go into something and you're going to continuously, relentlessly work out how to improve. So we have this saying that we suck now compared to where we are in the future. So I want to be able to look back on 1 year from now and say, we weren't even good today. So it's this constant mindset around continuous improvement, because improvement compounds. So if you set standards or higher standards, even for the little things, you get these marginal gains, and those marginal gains compound. So our mindset is always, always, always be trying to get those insights and trying to relentlessly improve that day. If you go back, you actually, the journey is like the hockey stick. You improve so quickly that you'd be surprised, and suddenly you become the best in the world at something. And it's almost surprising how quickly you can do that. So the power of compounding.
And where did that come from, that mindset?
I think it's like a burning desire within you. I always say probably the number one trait within an entrepreneur is competitiveness. If you have that drive and you really, really, really want to win, then you're going to find a way to win. And in order to win, you have to keep improving. You can't flatline. It's like a sports team. It's like anything, right? Like to be really great, you have to continuously improve. And so we just look at every little detail and say, how can we be better? How can we be better? How can we be better? And today, even as a big business doing billions in revenue, how do we set that standard within our wider company? So we have a thing called Brains Trust within our business. And what the Brains Trust does is it's basically a mechanic. And it was actually a John Lasseter, Steve Jobs mechanic, but it allows you never to flatline. And so basically a group of experts in any one area every 4 weeks on a regular cadence actually judge and critique and challenge the work in every area in our business. And so what that means is that every 4 weeks, we're challenging the work and trying to make it improve. So when you come back 4 weeks later, it has to have improved. And all those challenges have to have been met. And so oftentimes it's a debate, and there's like healthy debate and tension, but it means that we can never flatline. And I would say as a percentage, most companies, most people flatline. And so flatlining is the enemy for us. We always want to continually get better.
Hey guys, I really hope you're feeling inspired from today's interview. Now the truth is, all successful e-commerce founders started from zero, with a spark of an idea and a whole lot of determination. But let's be real, building or growing an e-commerce business is no walk in the park. And that's where Foundr Plus comes in, which I'm really excited to share with you. It's a culmination of a decade worth of work at Foundr. So if you're feeling stuck in your e-commerce business, you're lacking confidence to move forward, or you're worried about making costly mistakes or not knowing how to grow your business, Foundr Plus is here to support you on your journey. You get access to a customized learning pathway with proven frameworks from successful e-commerce founders for fast results, incredible programs, a supportive community, weekly live mentorship, exclusive savings on startup tools, and 24/7 real human support. Try Foundr Plus today for just $1 for 7 days so you can accelerate your business goals. Visit foundr.com/start $trial or click the link in the description to claim your trial. All right, now let's jump back in the show. Has there been a time where you guys ever have flatlined in this journey?
We've never flatlined. I can honestly say every year we get substantially better. And not just a little bit, we improve significantly. It's the reason, I guess, in a short time we can grow to the size we had, especially given, we've never had any outside equity or loan sort of banks or really borrowed money outside of that first loan from our parents. And, part of that mentality is that relentless focus on improvement.
I know you said that as entrepreneurs, we love to compete, but have you and your brother always had this insane drive? Were you born with it? Is it something that was cultivated?
I think we just grew up in a very competitive environment. I wouldn't say our parents made us competitive, but we've always just been competitive. I mean, we compete with each other. We just always been competitive. And I think you're just kind of born with that, like that competitive fire. And I think it's hard to manufacture that to be honest. And I just think it's the most important trait in an entrepreneur.
And when you look back, like, what do you think you guys got really, really right?
Yeah, I think I think what we got really right is we were sort of disruptive in a sense, right? Because we went to China really early. It was when China was just good at manufacturing, and we've built effectively the whole organization. A lot of the organization now out of Asia, out of Hong Kong and Shenzhen, and we were getting China when it was sort of moving from just being a manufacturing economy to also being really great at building stuff. And there's a lot of smart people in China that work really, really, really hard. And a lot of our automation team, engineering team, design team, merchandising team are all kind of based there. And that's been a huge advantage for us in being disruptive, all the way through to how we sort of build and design automation. A lot of our competitors outsource their production. It's still produced or hand produced on production lines. For example, our X-Shot brand, we produce 42 million dart blasters a year, 15 million water blasters. And we make them from a plastic granule to a finished product in packaging without any people. That's really disruptive versus our competitors. And we've only been able to do that because of what we've set up over in Asia. And so I think we got that really right. I also think we really, really, really understand how to pick trends and get on them fast. If you look at our record, whether it was a bunch of balloons, the number one summer toy in the world, whether you look at its mini brand, which is currently the number one selling toy in America, last year it finished number 2 and number 3. It just got picked by Hot Wheels at the end of the year, which has been perennial and number one for volume and dollars. But again, like getting insights and trends, if you look at a brand like Rainbow Corns, how we got on the giant mystery surprise egg trend really early, how we won that. We were first to pick the fidget trend, so we signed Fidget Cube off Kickstarter, which kicked off the biggest trend maybe in toy history. And so I think we've been really good at picking trends and what's coming and being on those super early and picking great concepts and great ideas. And sort of being really relentless around constantly trying to gain insights and action those insights. And so we have an approach around sort of fast fail and fire bullets before we fire cannonballs. So it's really having a strong thesis and having a strong insight for something and then firing a bullet around it. And if it works, firing a cannonball. And I think that's really been our approach in our toy business and very much in our consumer business as well.
What advice would you give to founders that are looking to create a new line of product or looking for a trending product? What's your take?
Running an e-commerce company, it's really important that first where you pick the right category of goods for e-commerce, because there are lots of examples of e-commerce companies that have grown in scale, but they always lose lots of money. For example, koala mattresses. Your cost of customer acquisition is so high and you're only selling them a mattress maybe once in 10 years or 20 years, and then you have to try and sell them add-ons. It's very difficult to build a profitable e-commerce business in certain categories. The category has to make sense. Maybe it's you're building brand online, but it has to have a high margin, low freight, once you acquire a customer, they'll keep coming back. So for example, shoes make a lot of sense as an e-commerce business because you can really build the brand and the brand image and the ecosystem online and control that. Also, it's a high margin, low freight category. And once you win a customer, they might keep coming back and buying, shoes from you for a long period of time. Sunglasses are another good one. So there's certain categories that make sense for e-com, certain categories that don't. I would argue that FMCG equals most companies that are in FMCG and start in FMCG or for consumer really, really struggle. They all lose a lot of money, whether it's, Harry's or Glossier, they all end up going into retail at scale because they can't build a profitable business direct to consumer. When you've got Walmart shifting billions of products every single day and you're trying to acquire a single customer for a single category, for a single product, take Harry's razors, that scale that you're competing with is almost impossible to beat. And so you see them with Glossier that are now going into Sephora, or you see Harry's, they went into Target and Walmart, and now they've, got scale at retail. So really, when you've got to be really specific about the category first and make sure it makes sense if you're just running an e-commerce business. And if you're in a category like FMCG, then you've got to be very, smart around making sure you use scale retail in order to build a profitable business. So that's probably a lot of the mistakes I see. People go into the wrong the direct products and that lose a lot of money. And that's, I see that almost every day.
You guys have only ever borrowed that $20,000 from your parents, and now you've built a multi-billion-dollar a year annual revenue company. That's highly unusual. Can you talk us through how that is possible, even from a cash flow perspective or even a scale perspective?
This whole raising capital and raising series A, B, C, D, F, Z, to me is like a little bit archaic. I look at businesses like Oatly and all the hype around Oatly and the market cap on Oatly. For every dollar that Oatly ships, it loses $1.42. It works on 15% gross margins. To me, FMCG is different to, these tech multiples, and it just puzzles me, how these companies operate like this and how they're valued so highly. Obviously, that a lot of them have recorrected through this period or this last sort of 6 months. But to answer your question, we started and we lived literally off nothing for 7 years. So even when we were making tens of millions of dollars a year, we still lived on like literally dollars a week. And our business structure is set up very differently. We use the scale, big retail, Walmart, Target, Tesco, Carrefour, and we only ship in toys. To this day, we still ship FOB. So in the early days, we had our retailers paying 30% deposits to us, and then they would pick up the goods from us directly at factory or at port, and then they would pay the balance. And so it meant that our retailers were effectively funding a lot of the goods. We were very low risk. And still to this day in our toy business, we actually don't ship and hold and pay for our own domestic inventory. We run a very lean inventory model. And actually in the whole toy market, this was very disruptive. All our competitors still ship domestically all around the world, and they put it into their own DCs in country and distribute to retailers from there. We don't do that still to this day. And so we were able to, in the early days, get our first big deal where we ended up making sort of $1 million was on this David Beckham product with Walmart. We came out, we made $1 million. We really looked after that $1 million, and that helped us fund the next level and the next level, keep funding our production. And so it's that same as compounding improvement. It's amazing how fast compounding goes. It's amazing. If you take I think it's 32 numbers and you compound them, suddenly you've got a huge, huge, huge number. And so it's the same thing here. We really, even when we were making lots of money, we still lived off nothing. We still spent nothing. And we still had this cognitive approach of how do we build our business to make profit. So even when we had toys that weren't really selling through at retail and we were bad at making toys, we would still hustle to sell enough of them to enough countries, to enough big retailers that would pay deposits and ship them FOB, that would still make profit. And then we'd do another product and do the same thing. So eventually when we got good at making product and we were getting reorders, and we were becoming more successful, we were just becoming more and more and more profitable, essentially. And that compounding effect has allowed us to grow. Even if you take, say, our diaper business, we started that with basically nothing 3 years ago. That business, this year it will do, over $200 million from a standing start 3 years ago. And literally to build that brand was less than a few $100,000. Of course, we took money from ZURU to help fund production runs and to fund the order growth. But outside of that, it's very lean.
You talked about in the early days the terms. You have favorable terms where effectively retailers are funding the production, and that allows you guys to be cash flow positive and not go in the red and then get into cash flow problems. And you said it was quite disruptive. How did you switch the retailers to agree to those kinds of terms?
I didn't think we always we didn't always flip it, to be fair. Like we did with all our distributors. Sometimes we had to hustle with our distributors because we also had some distributors in those early days, and we would always make them pay a deposit and always make them pay as soon as we shipped the goods because we had no real choice. But with retail partners as well, and they weren't all on those terms, but we would often negotiate terms. But I think the main thing is just the shipping FOB, the fact that our retailers took ownership of the goods from us at port in China. Whereas most people buy the inventory, put it in the warehouse, ship to their retailers, they have ownership of that inventory. We didn't have any of the ownership of inventory. So, that really, really helped us. And then we've kept that model to this day, which, as a top 10 toy company, literally none of our competitors have that model. And so it's really allowed us to continue to run the lean operation. I take, for example, our UK operation. We have about, on the toy side of the business in the UK, about 5 people. We do about 2.5 times less turnover than Mattel. Mattel's number 1 in the market in the UK. But they have over 200 people, I believe, in that UK office. And we have 5, but we're only doing sort of 2.5 times less revenue. So we're able to run a relatively lean operation in comparison to a lot of our competitors because of effectively our model.
There's no doubt, insane growth. You guys are one of the largest toy companies in the world. What have been some unexpected challenges that you could share along the journey?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of challenges, I think we just had every challenge along the way. I touched on some of them earlier, right? We had challenges in those early days, on those first 2 products, we got sued by one of them and we had no money. Literally, we had no money to defend ourselves in a lawsuit. So there was a Boulder, Colorado company, and I was going to Colorado, going around all these law firms saying, hey, how do we defend ourselves? And every sort of lawyer and firm was saying, well, it'll probably cost you a minimum of $1 million to defend this. And so you work out how to scrap and hustle and find a right way around it. And I remember I found this lawyer, his name was Chad, get his last name. But I kind of pitched Chad and sold him on the fact that we're going to win this case and that, he could help us and share in it and I'd do most of the work. And we just had to, have him sort of look over it and put his name to it. And we found a way to do it really, really cheaply. And that was the mindset always. When you don't have a choice, you've got to find a way effectively. And so we just had problem after problem after problem, going through. And you know what? Still to this day, one of the things that you have to accept about being an entrepreneur is you're always going to have problems. You're always going to have fires. It's how you solve those problems. And I'd say early on, I used to get really stressed about them. And today they're almost like a given, right? So it's like, hey, calmly, how do we work through this to solve this issue?
You have this relentless mindset. Obviously, your brother's the same. Have you ever thought or about giving up? Were there times where it was so tough, Nick, where you thought this is too hard?
You know what? Honestly, there were so many hard times in China, but it never seemed like an option. There was nothing in me that was gonna give up. And we had all sorts of experiences in those early days in China. I had some pretty dicey experiences. I was 18 in China and my mum was desperate to get me home. In fact, one of the people I first went over there with, lasted about 3 or 4 months and went home. It was tough. We were going a little bit crazy. Me and Matt were literally the only Westerners in the place we were in. So we didn't see any other sort of people that spoke our native language, for 2 years. And so we were going a little bit crazy. So there were, lots of tough times. I remember my brother once, we'd moved apartments at the stage and we were in this apartment. We were on probably the 20th floor. I think we were going a little crazy and I had a desk kind of near the door into the apartment that I was working on. And I called out to my brother and there was no answer. So I looked around the apartment. I was like, he hasn't come out the door past me. So I'm looking around the apartment for him. Nowhere. He's climbed out the window to the floor, 1 floor down, and he's just lying on the windowsill, 20 stories up reading his book. So he's climbed down one floor and lying on the neighbor's windowsill, just reading his book. So I think we were starting to go a little bit crazy at that point. But like, that's kind of like an illustration, I guess, of, you know, we were just like, I don't know, at that point, scrapping and kind of like trying to keep our head above water, I guess.
Hey guys, have you ever thought, what if I could just work with somebody one-on-one that's already done it to help me start or grow my e-commerce brand? Well, we get asked this question all the time. We have an amazing network of founders, super successful founders at Foundr. So we launched this coaching and mentorship program. So if you want to start your e-commerce business and work with us one-on-one to help you launch it fast, then go to foundr.com/start mentorship to see if you qualify. Or if you want to grow your e-commerce brand even faster and work with our experienced coaches and mentors one-on-one, then go to foundr.com/grow mentorship. All right, now let's jump back into the show. A lot of people, when they were 18, they're not going to China to try and launch businesses.
I mean, I still like had probably not those early years, didn't have so much my share of fun, but again, we just didn't have any money. So I'd still like go and do things. I remember I was, you know, I'd eventually was spending a lot of time in Hong Kong, and I was living in my little showroom. My showroom was probably 3 meters long, and I had a table in my showroom, and I had some old shelves that I've found from another old showroom, and I used to live under the table. So I unwind my mattress with the table. That was the only spot that had enough room to sort of lie down and sleep, and I'd live in my showrooms. We literally, like, we were living still off like no money. I'd wash in the public bathrooms. And I remember going out to a bar with some of the rugby guys. I was sort of playing a little bit of rugby in Hong Kong, and I had this budget to live on per month, and I believe it was 800 Hong Kong dollars a month, which is about, you know, 120, 130 US dollars. And I'd made the mistake of sort of going to a bar with the rugby guys, and they'd like put the round on me, and it was literally half my monthly budget at a Hong Kong bar. It was like 400 Hong Kong dollars. So I had to spend like literally half my budget on this one round of beers. But that's how, like, we just had nothing, right? I remember like being broken for the next few weeks, thinking I'd spent most of my budget on this one round of beers. So I don't know, that kind of gives you an example. So those first few years there wasn't a lot of partner or going out or doing the things that most 10-year-olds do. We just worked 24/7, 7 days a week.
Love to talk about leadership. We've got a team of 5,000 worldwide. How do you even stay on top of that number, and what's your approach to leadership, and has it changed as you've scaled?
Big time. So our core team kind of outside of factories. Most of our factories are automated, but some of them aren't. But our core team is about 1,500 globally, across our offices. And I guess my approach to leadership has definitely changed over that time. I would say I've learned a lot, and I'm still definitely learning, because I'm more of an entrepreneur. I'm not necessarily great at the process and the structural side of stuff. But what I would say at a top line and part of our DNA is, you know, leadership is super, super important. Like having that big vision and like really motivating people and, you know, I will see that, you know, a big part of what I do is focusing on talent and what we call talent density. So really getting the best people on the bus and putting them in the right seats. The bus will drive in the right direction. There's another Jim Collins one for you. But that part is really, really, really important. I also strongly believe in meritocracy. I think it's very hard to manage a lot of people if they're not hungry to succeed and they're not aligned, their individual success is not aligned with the company's success. And within any company, there's a certain amount of people, I'd say 10% of people, that really, 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 truly shift the needle. So aligning those people's interests to the company's interests and making them really strong leaders, that filters down to growing more teams. So we actually say that in every position now in our company, we want to, you know, hyper specialize people. So only the best can become generalists. So if you're not the best, you're hyper specialized in an area. And we also believe in experts leading experts. So we don't believe in managers or management. The best should always be on the tools and leading the team. They know how to pick the best talent in that area because they're the best at what they do. And that's really served us well. So we really have like a very flat structure. We're completely unbureaucratic as a company. We want to move fast. We want to action insights really quickly. We want to have a fast fail kind of approach to what we do. We want our leaders to be, you know, on the dance floor, not on the balcony. We always believe they should be in the weeds at all times, because that's where you get the most insights No one is above anyone else. You want to be, getting your hands dirty all the time as well. And so I think this sort of DNA for us has developed over time, and we want our leaders to sort of demonstrate, I guess, all of these qualities. And I guess our leaders as well, their job is to set really strong frameworks for people to work within, and then really push that relentless pursuit of improvement and marginal gains. I think, setting those, being really making sure they drive the cadence of our brains trust meetings and drive improvement is a big part of sort of leadership within our company. And I think, part of my role and part of how that's sort of changed as a leader within our business, as you get bigger and bigger, what ends up happening naturally is that you become more and more complex as a business. It just naturally gets more complex. So my job is to make sure that we simplify our business, that we streamline our business, that we're rationalizing what we're doing, and we're keeping everyone on the same page within those sort of strong frameworks that we set and within the vision that we set. And so that's often really hard because complexity is actually quite easy to do, but simplicity is often quite difficult. So my job is challenging the team. Say we're going into a new category and they want to develop 7 SKUs. And I'm like, okay, with 7 SKUs, how many more dollars in sales would that give us than 4 SKUs? And they might say maybe 20% more revenue. And I'll say, well, what about all the R&D time, engineering time, the tooling time, putting it into production of those 3 extra SKUs? Could we use that resource somewhere else? Could we get a better return on investment, return on time using that resource elsewhere? Will that streamline our sales team to only selling those 4 SKUs rather than selling 1 or 2 SKUs to all different buyers globally, which gives us less economies of scale on the manufacturing side? Does that align our marketing team? So the marketing team are getting behind less SKUs and doing a really good job rather than being fragmented in their marketing and their messaging. And so my job is always like putting those challenges forward to really rationalize the team to make sure we're getting the best return on investment for that resource and the best return on individuals' time. And so I'm always challenging everyone within our team. I'm saying like, make waves, not splashes. If it doesn't shift the needle, don't do it. And so my job is like really sort of driving that as well. And I would also say one of the big things I've learned about leadership is when you're an entrepreneur, you're always on the tools. And I'm still always tools. The reason I'm here in Minneapolis right now is because it's where I learn the most. I'm always with retail. I'm always asking questions. But one of the big things that, that as a leader is I think this question, and this was something that was, actually I learned relatively recently, and this question of asking everyone, whether it's a customer, whether it's people in your team, whether it's other stakeholders, what does success look like for you? What does success look like? And it's a really powerful question. What does success look like? And then how do I support you to create that success? And I think that was, as a leader, that's a question now I use all the time in lots of situations. What does success look like for you? What does success look like tomorrow? What does it look like in a year? What does it look like in 5 years?
In 2018, you expanded to ZURU Edge. Can you tell us what the thinking was there?
The toy market it's a big market, but it's very, very fragmented. If you walk down a toy aisle, you'll see every peg is a different SKU, and that SKU is literally 60% of the whole entire toy aisle, changes every year. And so toys sets you up. You almost have this healthy paranoia in the toy market because trends move so quickly. You work in every manufacturing form, whether it's roto molding, injection molding, electronics, plush, selling. You're working at scale, at pace, and recreating so much of your product line every year, which almost sets you up to go into other categories really, really well because you're so paranoid all the time to stay ahead of trends and everything that you almost set these systems to become really great at scaling in different areas really, really, really quickly. But the problem with the toy business is, we can grow to a couple of billion revenue in toys annually. But after that, it gets really difficult to keep growing just because of the size of the market. And so I started to have this thesis that we're really good at building, factories and automation and being super efficient on the back end and being disruptive. And so that's a core competency within our business. But I look at some of these other categories and I look at diapers and it hasn't really changed in 20 years. And, Pampers has 30 meters of the same SKU that doesn't change year to year. I'm like, how commoditized is this category? But also I started to create this thesis that, there's a change in a sort of a modern consumer or new age consumer and Gen Z and millennial in terms of what they're demanding from brands. So there's, pillars within brands that are really demanding now. and they don't necessarily want to buy the same brands as their parents did. So they're demanding sustainability pillars, transparency pillars. They're just demanding new things. They have less trust maybe in traditional brands. So you've got the rise of this new age consumer, but you've also got the rise of, AI and machine learning behind ad targeting. So you've got digital advertising, which is highly optimized, where you can really target a specific message and learn through data what specific message resonates with that specific audience. So you've got the rise of a new consumer. You've got a really efficient way to effectively reach that consumer. And then also in a lot of these consumer goods categories, you've got a lot of monopolies and duopolies. And like Elon Musk says, when you've got a monopoly, you get pretty lazy. When you've got a duopoly, you're lazy. When you've got a monopoly, you get really lazy. And a lot of them have a lot of entrenched capital around the world, and they're sweating that capital really hard. And oftentimes, sort of like Tesla, you come in with a whole new approach and build all your factories fresh and, use all the latest technology that's evolved around the world. You can actually come into a category and be relatively disruptive. So I guess that was my theory. And these categories that we've gone to are much bigger than the toy market. Can we bring that same level of being on trend, that same level of disruptiveness from a factory and manufacturing standpoint, and that same level of disruptiveness through digital and leading on new platform like TikTok to, bigger consumer goods categories. So that started us out on ZURU journey, which I started with, Rascal and Friends Diapers in New Zealand was the test thesis. We took 32%, I think we're up to 36% market share in our biggest supermarket group down there within 1 year. Second biggest brand in the market, Treasures, went out of business after that year. Maybe not a great story, but it just showed the power of our model. We went on to launch in Australia. We won Coles Non-Food Supplier of the Year award within our first year of launching there again. And the category director there, Carly, said, was incredible in the award that we'd taken a staggering market share in a short amount of time. Kimberly Clark on Huggies, they started issuing surveys to mums across both markets, sort of working out why we were taking this market share. And within, under 2 years, we were, according to Nielsen data, already second in Macca's in Australasia. We went on and we created that same success in Walmart Canada, taking over a 20 share. We've recently signed, Coco Melon and Rascals for our Walmart US launch and sort of launched it all around the world, 30 countries and all the biggest retailers. So that was sort of the thesis proved at that point. We were like, wow. And on the back of that, we built, a 60,000 square meter factory in under 10 months, which is all state of the art. And I guess, that sort of proved our thesis that we could go into these categories that, if you look at the baby category, Pampers, which is Procter & Gamble, and Kimberly Clark, which is Huggies, have dominated it for decades, and that we could actually go into these categories with these big players and actually be disruptive. And that set us on the journey. And now we're building out, our personal care haircare category. Of course, Monday Haircare been a huge success globally. Number one haircare brand in the world on TikTok. It's been disruptive every market it's launched in. It was in the UK last week. It was just launched in Asda, already launched in Tesco and Boots. And Asda said it was already outselling Pantene, which is the market leader, did the same in Australia. And so we can really be disruptive in some of these categories. And so, we're sort of focusing on 5 core verticals: household cleaning, health and wellness, personal and beauty, baby care, and of course, pet food and pet care. So it's been a very fast journey. I think 42 months or something since we started it, and it's absolutely the fastest growing sort of FMCG consumer goods sort of company in the world now.
Incredible. Well, Nick, that's a wrap. Thank you so much. That was an incredible interview. Congratulations on all of your success, and thank you for just sharing so much incredible experiences, lessons learned with our community, and look forward to continuing to watch your journey.
Hopefully there were, lots of good lessons in there, a few good stories as well.
Hey guys, if you love this episode, make sure to check out this interview with Scooter Braun on how he identifies talent that could go on to find wild success like Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande.
Justin Bieber was the most talented, gifted kid I'd ever met. It was so insane how great of a singer he was, how soulful he was, what he could do on the drums naturally, taught himself with guitar, drums. Like, he was a phenomenon. And we met at the perfect time in both of our lives.